Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Madden and Benz Unfiltered. Tim Benz and Mark Madden with you, courtesy of Bella Construction. Go to mybellaRoof.com. 27 years of experience in the market, roofing, siding, windows, and doors. mybellaRoof.com. Check them out for all your construction and development needs. Starting things off today, even though it's a Monday in the middle of football season, the Steelers play tonight, an opportunity to talk about the Penguins, and we should seize it while we can, Mark, because I'm not even so sure how much longer they're going to stay relevant with the way they're playing right now.
Well, relevance, a term I don't like being used in a case like this. They still have Crosby. They're still going to have players set milestones. To me, there's still always going to be something to watch with this team. But in terms of being a playoff contender, I think the magic of the loser point will keep them closer longer than maybe they deserve. Like, they're 3-6-1, Tim. They're only 2 points out of a playoff spot right now. It seems like they should be further back, but that's the way the league is. The whole Atlantic Division is 500. So if we want to talk about the way they're playing, they're terrible. I mean, look at those two games Friday and Saturday at Edmonton and at Vancouver. Edmonton out-skated and out-physical them. Never mind the disparity in talent. And Vancouver came from 2-0 down to go ahead 3-2 by scoring 3 times in 65 seconds. You look at those two games, that's the story of the Penguins so far in a nutshell.
Yeah, the whole Western Canadian trip was terrible. There were turnovers galore. The goaltending stinks. The defense stinks, whether it's decision-making in their own end or simply defending in their own end. From the neutral zone back, it's bad. And the Stars are struggling. You know, Malkin was hot early. It wasn't until the Vancouver game where he woke back up again. Sid only has 1 goal so far. Letang, I think, only has 2 goals and 1 on the during the course of the losing stretch. It's been bad all around, and I don't know where the help is coming from because I don't know what kind of wiggle room they have to improve the roster, especially if the goal is to get younger and sort of get more draft picks into the system without constantly mortgaging the future.
There is no help coming. None. Okay? There's going to be talent leaving, like when they trade Pettersson at the deadline for future assets, be it draft picks or prospects or whatever. That's where this team is going. They ain't going to get help. To even expect that they should get help is insane. This team is exactly as it appears. And part of the problem when that time comes, when guys like Pettersson leave, when the towel is being metaphorically thrown in, Crosby, Malkin, and Letang have never been on a bad team before, except for the previous 2 years, but they didn't understand then that the team was bad. And it certainly wasn't this bad. At any rate, Sullivan should know. He played on some bad teams, and he coached some teams that weren't great prior to coming to Pittsburgh, but they just don't get what they are yet, and that amazes me. How can you watch the tape of Edmonton and Vancouver and not understand exactly what this Penguins team is?
Yeah, and they keep coaching counter to it. They keep acting like they can rewind the clock to 2017 again, and clearly they can. And the thing that frustrates me about Pettersson is he's the exact kind of guy they should be trying to find, and more likely they're going to end up moving him.
Yeah, but by the time they're good, he's long gone anyway. You know, Tim, this team's so bad you have to just move on from it. Okay, I understand that Pettersson's the kind of guy they should be looking to keep. He's late 20s. Again, you have to understand what's best for this team. Fenway and Dubas have to look at it mercilessly from here on out and make the moves accordingly.
I think Dubas is willing to do that. I don't think Fenway is, and I know the coach is, and I know what Fenway thinks about the coach. He's not their Belichick, as I've heard you sort of allude to their thinking.
Well, then they're going to stink forever. Then they're going to be bad for a long time, even longer than they should, given the current circumstances. If they still think this team can win, and there's some way to patchwork it to something of note, they're insane. Okay? I always get told, do you think you know more than they do? In this case, absolutely I do.
Well, the great irony about the Belichick comparison for Fenway is Belichick was merciless when it came from moving on from people in a lot of cases. He didn't have a stretch like this until the bitter end when they cut ties with him eventually in New England. And he was noted for doing the exact opposite of what Sullivan is doing, and that is to morph to the kind of team that you have, and move on from guys when the opportunity presents itself, be a year early on that instead of a year late.
In some ways, Sullivan is proving he's not the coach we thought he was, or that Fenway thinks he is. I wrote in my column for the Trib today, Tim, that Herb Brooks is best known for creating that blended style of North American and European when the U.S. upset the Soviets in the 80 Olympics and ultimately won the gold medal. But Herb didn't coach every team he had that way. Herb looked at the talent on hand and coached accordingly. If he had muckers and grinders, he turned mucking and grinding into an art form. But he didn't force his preferred style down the throats of talent who couldn't execute it. That's the difference between a great coach like Herb Brooks and a pretty good coach like Mike Sullivan.
Who will be the two goalies in Pittsburgh by the time the season ends?
Jarry and Nedeljkovic.
Oh. I mean, that's probably true. I hate hearing that because
Tim, you're operating as if this team can still do something. You made suggestions to that end, like keeping Pettersson, several times this conversation. The most important thing for the goaltending is that Blomqvist and Murashov develop properly. And Blomqvist up here getting shot full of freaking holes isn't what's best for his development. You got to do what's best for the future, not for right now. And if somebody like Sidney Crosby can't live with that, then other solutions have to be pursued. But they have to do what's best for the franchise. No one has more respect for Sid than I. Go ahead.
I don't understand why his development is best served playing against lesser competition in the AHL if you got to figure out if he's good enough to do it in the NHL.
Because in a higher league, if he's not ready, he can get scarred. You'd like to think he's made of sterner stuff, and he's played pretty good so far. But the NHL isn't about development, Tim. It's about right now. I'm right about this, period.
No, I mean, I get that from like a Rucker McGroarty standpoint. I just think that the goalie thing is a little bit different because you got to play at that level to know if you can do it. Like, I get the minutes, how they're allocated. If they're not going to play McGroarty in high leverage situations and you want to see him develop where he actually gets the minutes and gets the power play time and things of that sort. But I feel like, how long has Blomqvist been over here now? A year and a half, something like that, 2 years?
Last year was his first full year of North American professional hockey.
So you want to see him get at least one more full AHL season under his belt before he's exposed, given the bad defense?
I think that is very likely what's best for his development, yes.
I wish they'd taken the option of Nedeljkovic and Jarry away in the first place because I don't think either of them were ever worth keeping to begin with.
Well, you signed Jarry to that contract a couple years back that there's no getting out of, that there's no trading. That's why he'll be back in Pittsburgh. Hey, if it were up to me, I would never have him play for the Penguins again. I would have moved on from him after he blew that playoff series in 2021 against the Islanders. And Ned's a backup. He's a pretty good backup, but that's all he is. And the more he plays, the worse he plays, and we're seeing that now.
Yeah, and you see the battling thing, him as a battler. Well, the goalies like that tend to find their level, and I think he's found it. If the best thing you can say about him is how hard he tries, then it's probably because he's not good enough to be a starter on a regular basis. I mean, even last year, when things were going so well for him when it comes to wins and losses, the stats weren't great. It's not like he was putting up numbers that were all that much better than Jarry. They're almost identical, actually, during the winning streak. The Penguins just happened to score a bunch towards the end of the season, more than they had all year.
Well, this year, their defense and goaltending is just killing them. They haven't allowed less than 3 goals in a game, 10 games in. That is catastrophic. This guy here, DNA 77, let's get him up here because I want to address this. It shows that people don't get it. He says trade Crosby, Malkin, Letang, and Jarry, rebuild, easy peasy. That whole playing for one team right off into the sunset stuff is BS. Yeah, okay, here's the thing. It's too late to correct that. The time to do that was in 2018 or 19 when they should have traded Malkin for what would have been a great return from, say, Florida, when Sid had just turned 31, and you could still assemble hunger, energy, and youth around him to legitimately take another run. Now, had you done that, there are still no guarantees, but that would have been your best bet. The approach they took, what's happening now, was always inevitable. It's a overnight collapse that's 5 years in the making.
Well, this guy Ron says Pens need to tank. That's happening organically. I mean, like, when you say tank, some people that's more like trying to do something. That's just happening as it is. Period. That's the result. Like, they don't have to, like the guy in front of him, you don't have to trade the guys that you're talking about trading for them to be in the lottery. They might be in the lottery as it is on their own.
The biggest problems are Jari with that contract and what's happened with him. Him getting sent home to work with the organization's director of goaltending, whatever that is. And then he's in Wilkes on a conditioning assignment. Something happened there that we don't know, because all of that, save the conditioning assignment, is illogical. But I'm not sure we need to know. I'd like to know. But what's important is he's put them in a real quandary with how bad he is and how he's betrayed the trust of anybody with a brain and eyes. And he can't be trusted again. That's the problem moving forward.
Is there anybody so desperate to take on Karlsson's contract and get him out and take on a significant enough portion of his contract so it makes it worthwhile to move him?
No, I wouldn't. And it used to be with him that his production outnumbered his mistakes. But now he has, I think it's 65 points in 95 games as a Penguin. He's just been rotten. 62 and 92 it is. He's just been rotten. And nobody's going to want him. And making it even worse is, I can't read the guy's mind. He looks like he couldn't care less. He told Yoey the other day that Karlsson, thinks he's playing great. I mean, come on. Letang's struggling too. But Letang will battle. There's that word again. He'll battle to try to do better. Karlsson, not so much.
Well, Karlsson's just saying the same thing that Sullivan said over the years. I mean, like all throughout the course of the offseason, his mantra to anybody who would ask about criticisms is, you don't know what you're watching. Like, we make changes all the time. The power play isn't wrong.
Yeah, he's full of it. I know what I'm watching.
Agreed. But, you know,
with Karlsson, what Karlsson should be saying at the very least, Tim, well, I need to play better. I know that. But to say you're playing great, maybe he was doing that to F with Yoey. I don't know.
What's going on with Sid? How come he's not scoring more?
Looks really discouraged, doesn't he?
Yeah. And, you know, if he's discouraged because Jake Gensel isn't here, everybody else needs to get over that too, but him most of all, because he's the one that's out there without him. And I don't know if that's what it is. And I don't know who he thinks would be the best fit for him that's on this team. But again, that ties into the whole greater conversation. Who else are you getting at this point?
Well, now I think the loss of Jake is very tangible to him. I think last year was emotional. He still produced pretty much after Jake left because he still had adrenaline from being in the playoff race. But now, I mean, Brian Rust was never meant to be his best line mate, Tim. Brian Rust is Pascal Dupuis. He needs to be the second best line mate for Sid. And there's literally nobody on that team to put with Sid that would be better than what he's playing with. A bad roster.
What do you make of the power play? Out scoring a little bit, but at the same time is still giving up all sorts of shorthanded chances and odd man breaks.
It's a little better, but you're right. It's given up scoring chances the other way. Despite okay production, I think they ranked 12th in the league the last time I looked in terms of conversion percentage. That's not bad, but there are entire power plays they don't get in the zone and set up. So I would say whatever gains they made have been slight, although you can never downplay production. That's what it's all about, and that is appreciably better.
All right, so Penguins fans, we do want to hear from you. Give your comments on where you think things are going wrong, if it's fixable, and what you would do to help solve the situation. I think anything that you're talking about solving is going to take a long, long time and beyond the years 2024 and 25. Mark, let's get to the NFL. Let's get to the Steelers. Let's get to tonight.
Let me just wrap up. Let me wrap up by saying, Tim, I don't think that's bad. I think anybody who's mad about this is very short-sighted, hasn't been a fan long, or is fair weather. Every team goes through stretches like this, and sure, it's disappointing, and there are ways that maybe it could have been avoided. But I see people on Twitter saying, oh, this is hard to watch. Well, then don't effing watch, okay? Every team goes through this. Look at the Kings. Look at the Blackhawks. Look at the Red Wings. It was inevitable. Live with it.
Yeah, I'd say where I'm at is what you said in the middle there, that a lot of this could have been avoided. That they've painted themselves into
a lot maybe could have been avoided. Maybe. Like that trade I talked about, the big trade in 18 or 19, no guarantees that works.
Right, but I think we all had a lens through which you just described, the Red Wings, the Kings, and the Blackhawks, to see where something like this could wind up. And I also get frustrated over the decision to keep Sullivan as long as they have. And I'll admit it, I did buy in on the Karlsson thing because they had put so many of their chips in the table. Why not put all of them in the table? And if you're going to play that way, play that way. I think the Karlsson trade not working out is largely about how bad Karlsson has been as opposed to the mentality surrounding it. Like the Graves decision was strictly on Dubas. That was just a bad signing.
Graves and Jari are on Dubas. Karlsson was a reasonable gamble that hasn't paid off thanks to Karlsson. But they dumped a lot of dead weight and cap in the process. They just got, instead of smaller piles of excrement, Tim, they now just have one big pile.
Mark, as far as the Steelers go tonight, if they get to 6-2 at the bye, I don't think there was a right that anybody had to ask for more than that. They took care of business in the softer front half of their schedule. That is exactly what that would mean. If they walk into the bye in first place, I don't think people can gripe about anything big picture. It's just then you got to come out of the bye and take care of business against a much better second half of the schedule. You know, it's the easiest thing in the world to do. I do it. We all do it. Fans, media, whatever. When the coaching staff screws up, we're all over them. I do think it's time over the last 2 weeks to give them some credit. I actually think the coaching staff has had a good little run here over the past few weeks with decisions that they made, game plans that they've had, personnel decisions that they've made, adjustments at halftime, all things of that sort. Good special teams. I think the coaches have done a good job here the last month or so.
I agree with most of that, but the big thing is he made the right choice at quarterback, which a lot of people thought he didn't. I'm not a Tomlin fan. I think he makes more bad decisions than good over the past, 13 years. Confirms what I'm saying. But he made the right choice at quarterback. He was not populist. It was difficult. But once the choice got made, it's so obvious it was the right move. And Russ has been really good. And I guess Fields isn't available for the game tonight. But there ain't going to be no package of plays for him. That was evident in the Jets game when there were a bunch of opportunities to put him in there, and they let Russ score in a quarterback sneak instead.
The only reason I would agree with what Jay Glazer said or say there's some merit to it is how bad the Giants have been the last couple of weeks stopping quarterbacks from running. Like the last three quarterbacks they've faced have hurt them in one capacity or another running the football. So I could have seen Fields used in that regard.
Maybe, but one reason I'm against that quote-unquote package of plays in the first place is this offense finally has rhythm. In and out of the huddle, play to play. I don't want to break that up.
That's fair, and I think largely Tomlin has always felt that way, and I think Russ really feels that way. You know, for as much as Russ seems to like Fields, he rarely, if at all, endorses the idea of having a two-quarterback play package system. You know when Russ is 100% behind something because he talks it into existence almost. So when he's not, for as much as he talks around being critical of the idea, when he doesn't give it a full-fledged endorsement, you can tell that means he's not a fan of the notion.
Yeah. So I'm not either. I mean, I wouldn't be outraged if they had a package, but I think it's fine the way it is. I also think that the wide receiving core is going to have to be fine the way it is because I just don't think they're going to get nobody. I think they slow play attempts to get guys like a Cup or whoever. And now the Rams won. Cup played good. They're kind of in the playoff race like just about every team in the league is. I think at best they're going to get like a Mike Williams, somebody like that. And how much he helps, I don't know.
Well, it's to the old cliche. They never made an offer that the other team couldn't refuse. You know, they always gave San Francisco enough time to work it out with Ayuk. They always gave the Rams enough time to hold on to Cup. They never blew anybody's doors off to get the guy that they wanted. Like for better or for worse, what we were just talking about with Karlsson to get that deal done. You know, like there became points where they were bidding against themselves, but they never made the biggest bid. So the guy just stayed or went somewhere else like the Jets. You know, we keep hearing everybody always wants to play for Tomlin. Well, not one of those three guys forced his way into Pittsburgh or leveraged the process so that he could get to Pittsburgh. It just never happened.
Well, you're right. If the Steelers really wanted to get Ayuk, they could have. If they really wanted, like you said, they would have made an offer that San Francisco couldn't refuse. They are content to just miss, not unlike the Pirates in a case like that. And, Florio said he thinks they look for bargains. There's no bargains to be had in situations like this, except for a guy the level of a Mike Williams, as we may or may not see.
Since you brought up the Pirates real quick, Mark, did you watch any of the baseball? Did you watch any of the World Series?
No. None.
I mean, I haven't watched much of it because I'd been working. But, if baseball is going to be what baseball is, then at least give me the two best teams to play against each other in the championship. If you're set up to do this, then let's see it happen this way. Like I heard some people yearning for another recreation of Texas and Arizona. I don't want to see that. I mean, I'd rather see all the stars converged if you're going to have a system that makes it play out this way.
Yeah, but all this World Series does is remind me that the Pirates can't ever be there.
Well, that's true. I don't know if we needed this to remind us, but I get your point. Yes.
And I obviously the Freddie Freeman moment, the Kirk Gibson parallel, the call on that Freddie meet Gibby or whatever it was, that's kind of cool. But Tim, I don't need to watch the game to see that. I just need to watch SportsCenter.
Last thing, Mark. Pitt wins on Thursday and the Penn State win on Saturday. Everybody's got dreams of these two playing potentially in a playoff. I think the bigger deal for Pitt, just get into the playoff. Penn State should be in the playoff. You would think that they would be potentially, even if they don't win against Ohio State and they stay in the top 12 of teams getting in. Pitt's going to have to win the ACC. I think it comes down to the Clemson game, obviously, and then that's going to be one hell of a weekend at Acrisure Stadium because you might have Clemson right before the Steelers-Ravens game. So, I don't know. You tell me, what's the ceiling for Pitt, do you think, after seeing them whitewash Syracuse and take advantage of every Syracuse mistake that was out there?
I don't know what the ceiling is, but I do know, like you said, they have to win the ACC to get into the playoff. Pitt is not the kind of brand, doesn't have the kind of recent history that would merit them getting in if they did anything besides to win the ACC. They are not at-large material. So I think they probably lose 2 or 3 games. I mean, I'm still not all that sold. I think they've had a nice run. I think good fortune has blessed them the last couple games, but I do think they're much improved, and it's going to be a real shame when the Holstein kid leaves. And it might be a real shame if he doesn't play at SMU because Coach Genius left him in too long against Syracuse in the game that had long since been won.
Let's get some comments. Eric says, who do you think besides Pedersen will be dealt by the deadline? And do you believe Dubas's goal will be to collect draft picks? Could a big name like Rust or Raquel be moved?
I don't know who wants Raquel, although he's played good so far, if he keeps that up. But his ticket's too long and too big. I don't know. I don't feel like they have a lot of components that are worth trading that other teams will want, rather.
I think, you could look for, instead of just picks, sort of a more like a hockey trade, which was the theory behind the Gensel deal. But you could get more guys that are NHL ready, or at least in the NHL, that are young players. But those guys are hard to come by. People are loath to get rid of those guys, especially for prospects like we're talking about. I mean, the best thing that could happen is, if they're not going to win games, that Rust and Raquel could at least continue their productivity so they look attractive, kind of like Pettersson is.
Part of the problem there is, though, what if Sid is still trying to get a point per game? You trade guys he works with. This whole thing's a mess on a lot of levels. And I'll tell you what's going to be equally a mess, Tim, maybe a bigger mess than when they traded Gensel. If they trade Pettersson this year, when they're within striking distance of a playoff berth, however, just merely mathematically, because most teams are till very late, if you do that 2 years in a row, be perceived to be throwing in the towel, the dressing room will not react well. But that's too bad for the dressing room, because they're the reason the Penguins are in this mess in the first place.
Eric says Ned is no good either. Obviously referring to the conversation about Jari. Yeah, no kidding. I think Ned was always this version of himself. He just happened to play better at a spot where it seemed to matter more towards the end of last season. We got an inflated view of him. But, that acquisition, that signing is emblematic of everything we've been talking about. That's a move that a better team makes to hold on to the backup goalie, and they made it kind of thinking that he's better than what he is. And that's just one you just don't have to keep. You don't have to make that move, especially in the position that they're in.
No, I think they did that because they wanted Bloomquist and Wilkes. That's why.
Richard says the Penguins' biggest issue as the third oldest team in the league is trying to be outfast younger, faster teams. Whether it's ego or stubbornness, they refuse to face reality and see themselves as they really are. Karlsson has his money, Norris trophies, and the realization that he's never going to win a championship. So in turn, he simply doesn't care anymore. He's just coasting on the final seasons of his bloated contract.
Yeah, I agree with all that.
And then Ron adds, EK65 doesn't care. I think that's the big part of it. He seems to care about chasing points, but he's not chasing them hard enough. I'm almost at the point where if he cared more about the offensive end and it manifested, I'd be willing to give up the other stuff, but that's not even happening when he's got a chance to put the puck in the net or set up some assists.
Well, as I said in my column for the Trib, I hate to read minds, but when he told Yoey that he thought he's playing great, that kind of pushed me off the pier.
I would say the same thing could be said for some of Sullivan's preseason comments. I think those are things that are under the same tent. Mark, before we go, I know Chris likes to put up Mark Madden's concert corner, but how about Mark Madden's book reviews? Are you going to read the Van Halen book?
I will indeed read the Van Halen book for sure. The interviews with Alex have been just tremendous. I was sorry I missed Donnie Iris Saturday because I went to the Riverhounds game because they needed to win to clinch the playoffs, which they did. And instead I was subjected to a group of little people playing as Kiss after the game on the field. Mini Kiss performed. That was disturbing on a lot of levels. And Liverpool scored late to tie Arsenal 2-2 at Arsenal. Not the preferred result, but considering they're title contenders as well, I can live with it. So quite a full week.
All right, so Mark is going to be on at 2 o'clock today. That's when the pre-show leads into his show at 3 o'clock. I will be on DVE leading you into Steelers and Giants tonight on Monday Night Football, and then play-by-play there and on Fox Sports Pittsburgh as well. So we will be back next week.
And Tim, I will be at Sidelines. I'll be at Sidelines Beer House in Sewickley to watch the game.
All right, Sidelines Beer House in Sewickley for Mark today. For Giants and Steelers, we're back next week after the bye, and we'll set things up for the Washington game next week. This is Madden and Benz Unfiltered, brought to you by Bella Construction. Visit them at mybellaRoof.com.